Hello, everyone. This is the videos for chapter 6, and we're going to talk about learning. And I'm definitely going to hit on habituation and insight in this video. Um, and then I'm going to spend a lot of time on classical conditioning and operant conditioning. And then I'm going to finish talking a little bit about observational learning. But as I mentioned in this video, I'm going to begin by talking about habituation. Now, in order to understand habituation, you first have to understand that we have a natural reflex to orient towards some stimulus. What does that mean? It means when something is loud or big or fast moving, it pulls our attention naturally. If something is new or different, that pulls our attention naturally. Now, sometimes if that loud or big or new thing stops being new, stops being loud, or continues to act the same way over and over and over again, we stop paying attention to it. In other words, we habituate towards that stimulus. So maybe it was loud at first when you walked into that bar and there was music playing and people were talking and yelling, etc. But you sat down and after a while it just stayed loud. And so paying attention to everything doesn't make sense anymore. And so your brain habituates to that sound. Eventually you just stop paying attention to it. Um, now, this has to do with your reticular formation. One of the things I talked about in chapter 3 is that your eyes don't know how to habituate, your ears don't know how to habituate. They can't make a decision about what's important or not. Your eyes take in all of the information it can, uh, and it sends it into the brain. And it's at the reticular formation where habituation starts. And it's the reticular formation that says, this isn't important, stop focusing on this. Now, the opposite is also true. Uh, when you're growing up, especially when you're in elementary school, middle school, one of the things you have to do is the opposite of that. Force yourself to pay attention to things that are not necessarily interesting. When you're a third grader learning long division, the squirrel playing outside is way more interesting than this problem in front of you or the teacher talking for a long period of time. You've habituated to the teacher. You've stopped paying attention to her. And what's calling your attention is that squirrel playing outside. And it takes a great deal of effort and time to learn to habituate to the squirrel, which would normally be the interesting thing, and force yourself to focus, to orient your focus onto this complex task. So the reticular formation is helping you do both. Ignore things that are happening over and over again, that is habituation, but also to refocus. Now, this ability is super important because one of the issues that we have with our brain is that there's a limited amount of focus. And if you spend too much time focusing on the squirrel, it means that you cannot focus on the teacher. And so uh, that you're going to miss out on the important information. So habituating towards things is a super important skill that does take time to develop because your brain is just not capable of doing that well. Take the example of mom. Mom is trying to pay attention to the kids, but she's also doing the laundry or making a phone call. Well, trying to maintain focus on all of the tasks is going to get you tired. And what we understand now is that it's very difficult to pay attention to any of the three things well if you're trying to split your focus. We are not good at that task. No one is. It's not that some people are better or worse. Some people are good at multitasking, but a good multitasker focuses on the one thing, gets it done to where they need to, and then they move on to the next thing, and then they move on to the next thing, and then they come back when it's time to do the first thing again. For example, um, do the laundry, get all the stuff, all the clothes into the washer started, and then leave it and start cooking, and then leave that while it's simmering to do the next task, and then come back to the laundry. That is good multitasking. If you're trying to split your focus, you're actually going to do all three things worse. Now, uh, we do habituate. We also have the ability to dishabituate, which means all of a sudden you've habituated to something, but then all of a sudden it changes just slightly. And that slight change will make you focus on that again. Maybe you're very used to having your room in a very specific way. Everything is ordered in a specific way, and you stop paying attention to it until one day you walk into your room and you notice that some notebooks are not in place, right? If they had been in place, you wouldn't have noticed them. But because they're not in place, that forces you to dishabituate and it pulls your focus. Moms, again, are a great example. Moms, at first, when baby cries, they're super focused on the baby. But after a while, baby's crying, they're upset about something, and mom learns to habituate because they know the baby's just being fussy and they're not really crying, they're just kind of upset. But if that baby's cry changes, if they if it changes from like an angry cry to a pain cry, mom will notice that immediately. She will dishabituate and change her focus to that baby crying again, because habituation uh, is it doesn't mean that you're not taking in the information. Remember, your ears are still taking information. Your eyes are still taking the information. It's just your reticular formation is making a decision. This isn't important. This isn't important. This isn't important. When it changes, your reticular formation goes, it's changed. This might be something important. And now it pulls your focus. Now, this is one of the issues that people with post traumatic stress disorder have. They don't have the ability to habituate. And so that loud noise that is anxiety creating, it never goes away. They always focus on it. And so it always pulls their attention. And depending on what exactly the sound did, it might be a trigger for them. And so they never really get over that. It takes a great deal of therapy, sometimes medication, for them to start being able to habituate in a normal way. Now, another topic I want to talk about briefly is insight learning. And your book doesn't go over it too much, but I think it's an important part of learning, so I just want to mention it briefly. Now, insight learning is occurring entirely in your mind, right? So there is no trial and error in the real world. It's just you have some information in your mind, and given the right circumstances, sometimes you can just sit there and the answer comes to you, or you can play with the idea in your mind and then the answer comes to you. The classic example is they will put a chimp on a in a cage, and they will have some fruit that the chimp can't really reach. And at first, the chimp will try to jump. It'll try to maybe get on boxes, etc. But they can't get to it, and so the chimp will sometimes just sit down for a little while and think, and they're not doing anything, they're just thinking in their mind. And then all of a sudden, it dawns on them, that pole over there, if I grab it, I'll be able to shake the fruit from wherever they happen to be. And then they try it and it works. It's happening only in their mind. A more human example, I'm going to give you an example. My mom, she's a little bit older, and when uh, Instagram first came out, you couldn't make the pictures bigger. You couldn't um, zoom in just by touching it or by spreading it with your fingers. And this annoyed my mom to no end. And she was always like clicking on things or trying to open them. Um, and then out of nowhere, she got the idea to take a screenshot of the picture. And so she started taking a screenshot of the picture, and then the screenshot, she could zoom in it. No one taught her that. Um, it just came to her. Um, and that again is a form of insight learning. You have just enough information in your mind to rearrange the data until you come up with an answer that fixes your problem. All right, guys, in the next video, I'm going to talk about conditioning.